Hello there, my very good friends. On today's wrestling news, Jack Evans is leaving AEW. We're going to talk about the real reason Kushida quit WWE. Steve Austin is open to WrestleMania 39. But first of all, we have the latest on WWE's reported interest in a top AEW act. I'm Andy Murray.
I'm Michael Sidgwick.
And this is the news. Let's kick things off by talking about FTR. FTR. Interest from WWE in bringing those fellas back, reportedly, once their AEW contracts expire. The report came through from Fightful Select last night, stating that WWE internally had at least brought up the idea of potentially bringing back the tag team formerly known as The Revival. Now, it was noted in the original report here that FTR's contracts were due to expire this summer at some point, but AEW had a 1-year option, an extension option, that they may yet exercise on the contract. Now, Fightful updated their post shortly afterwards to say that AEW had informed them that FTR actually had over a year left on their contract. So whether or not that was originally the case, or maybe if AEW have exercised that option, that's unclear. But FTR are going to be in AEW for at least a year longer. They're bound to the company yet, and that means that WWE can't approach them legally. They get sued. It would be bad. But it's an interesting situation to consider. FTR turned down huge big money offers from WWE prior to leaving the company in 2020. We're going to go into this situation just a little bit more when we get to our Twitter questions today, specifically regards to how they might fit in WWE and why they might want to go back. But yeah, pretty surprising story to see breaking. I can see why, people within WWE would be interested in bringing any talented act into the company, but I can't really see that happening.
I can't see it happening either. Again, we'll delve into the whys and the why therefores imminently when we get to the Twitter questions later on. I will say, however, before we answer that question as to where they might fit in, etc., the need to bring in new acts has become increasingly stark, particularly when watching NXT 2.0 last night, which quite frankly was a bit of a disaster. If you want to know why it was a disaster, listen to our podcast later on today, wherever you get your podcasts from. It underscored the need for WWE to really think about its future, and if the future is with present day acts, then it's a lot brighter than what we saw from NXT 2.0 last night. But stick around, because I've got a little bit of a theory as to why it's not so implausible, this rumour.
Anyway, lovely stuff. Why have I stalled? I don't know. Jack Evans. He's leaving AEW. He confirmed as much himself on Twitter last night, actually, tweeting that he's had a fun and enjoyable run with the company, but it's coming to an end. He will not be re-signed when his contract expires in April. He'd like to thank everyone at AEW and the fans for the opportunity. So Evans has been with AEW since, I believe they had a little vignette that aired in May. Him and Angelico coming to AEW. The Hybrid 2 were obviously considerable mid-level players in the tag division early on. They wrestled at the first Double or Nothing. Best friends they were defeated by on that event. But their usage has kind of waned over the past couple of years. Most recently, Jack's most prominent role would have been when he had his head shaved after losing to Orange Cassidy. That was actually his last appearance on AEW TV. He's worked a few dark tapings since then, but there have been some complications with him. I believe late last year, he was in a weird situation with the Mexican police, bizarre, wasn't he? Where he was being held against his will and extorted, allegedly. So strange stuff going on there with him. But Jack was very open on Twitter about this whole situation. And usually I'm not in favor of responding to the troll accounts and giving them oxygen. You know who those accounts are. I'm not going to name them. But when it's a pro wrestler who has direct experience of these things coming and dispelling myths, it's a healthy thing to do. And appreciate Jack's honesty here. Replying to a bunch of different people here, stating at one point that it's just part of the business. Your contract comes up. If the company doesn't want to renew you, then the business arrangement is over. There's obviously a huge difference between people leaving companies at the end of their contract and being cut 18 months into a 5-year deal, as we've gone over several times. But critical of himself here, Jack Evans, saying, not to diss myself, but I wasn't giving any added value to the company, and truthfully, with a big roster, you got to do what you got to do. He said as well, I think that the release is largely because after the 4-month COVID layoff and then the time off from the broken face I had, a performance drop that I never really came back from. So I think Jack Evans was a really cool guy to sign early on because He's a tenured indie veteran. He was there in the heyday of Ring of Honor, doing the do-rag and the vest gimmick, all the high-flying stuff, and probably an influence on a lot of the younger wrestlers in that company who would have been indie fans back in the day. But clearly, it seems that both parties agree the time had come, and he is on his way.
Yeah, thoroughly expected development this. I think you could infer from his lack of TV time that it was all trending towards his direction. I think, to be fair to Jack Evans, I would say possibly signing with a major league at this point in his career was about 5 years too late, given his performance level, and he works a sort of style as well that is more exposed the more thrashed a performer gets. I just think it was 5 years too late for the guy. Respect for what he's done in the indie scene throughout his career. It never really materialised for him on the AEW stage, and he's frankly been very refreshing throughout his AEW tenure. I think he was atted by one of his fans, who's more than within their rights to say this, and they were sort of complaining about his lack of profile and his being underutilized by AEW. And Jack Evans had something quite interesting to say, and this is about 2 years ago, maybe at this point. He was asked why you're not being used more, and he said, frankly, the adjustment to national television was something that he didn't really he didn't really account for how difficult it would be. He said that's a very promo-based company, a very storytelling-based company, and he said that all wrestling schools should add to their curriculum how to pitch angles, how to really do some Americanized TV storytelling, because he was pitching stuff, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he said something to the effect of, I was just pitching, like, oh, I talk trash about this act, and we have a match, and I think he himself said that, AEW's booking is more sophisticated than that, and he struggled to sort of get himself on television as a result. Look, he will make money on the independent scene for as long as they will welcome him, and I think given his contributions to it, that will be for a long time yet. Yeah,
for sure. He has significant tenure in Mexico as well. He actually worked for Riot, the Mexican indie promotion, last month, a couple of days. So, hey, best of luck to him. The one time I've seen Jack Evans live was at a London indie show in 2017. I was sitting in the front row. He wrestled Will Ospreay, and for half of the match, he had a cigarette in his mouth. Very funny guy. So, personality's there. Good luck to Jack Evans. Kushida, he's left WWE. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, but we've had follow-ups on it. The most notable one coming from Joe Lanza of the flagship wrestling podcast, diving into the ins and outs and the whys of why Kushida has decided to leave WWE. And I mean, if you've got a working imagination, you can probably figure it out. It's because Jack at time absolutely sucked. That's not how it's stated here. I'll run through the report bit by bit. But yes, Kushida, he'd been with WWE since 2019, and he's been in contact with several New Japan wrestlers since leaving that company for WWE, showing displeasure at the way he'd been booked, specifically following NXT's developmental shift into 2.0 in September 2021. Specifically, he cited Jack at time and all the comedy skits with Ikemen and Jiro as something he didn't enjoy, and he felt that following the transformation from Black and Gold into 2.0, that the new regime wasn't as behind him as previous ones were. Thus, he decided to leave. Now, there's a lot of really good stuff in this report. Having departed Japan on good terms the first time around in 2019, Kushida reportedly didn't really fancy his chances much of becoming a major star in American wrestling, but felt that during his physical prime that he should at least give it a go, and that he did. 3-year contract, it's now expired. Didn't work out for him, unfortunately, but seemingly New Japan, a return there is back on the table. Now, amongst the reasons for his initial New Japan departure were a general feeling of stagnation in the junior heavyweight division. He's like a 5-time champion there, so that's understandable. And a lack of opportunities to compete as a heavyweight. Now, with regards to potentially returning to New Japan here, Kushida's already been in contact with the booking team to pitch ideas. So he's interested in dropping his old Back to the Future inspired babyface gimmick. He wants to work heel, join a faction, and do kind of an MMA inspired character, which has always been part of his in-ring arsenal at the very least. He's interested as well in working for leading indie group GLEAT, with Strong Hearts leader Shima among his desired opponents. There is a bit of collaboration between New Japan and GLEAT at the moment, with Strong Hearts crossing over into that programming. Now, it's noted here in the report that Kushida's friends in New Japan are treating his return as a given, pretty much. Nothing is guaranteed. He's a free agent, of course. He could conceivably go somewhere else, but that he's already in communication with the promotion certainly bodes well and points in that direction. So, yeah, and as he left WWE at the end of his contract, rather than being released, he doesn't have a non-compete clause.
Yeah. Absolutely, so you could conceivably like sort of jump into any promotion whenever he goddamn pleases. The only thing genuinely that shocked me about this report is that he was somewhat happy, or at least relatively happy, in the old black and gold era of NXT, because quite frankly, it was a sporadic appearance on that television program. He was 50-50 booked throughout. He was never really presented as this huge star akin to the old model of the guy in the front row who would come, immediately get launched into the title picture, and this never really happened for Kushida. And quite frankly, I think they underutilized him from the jump. He didn't really do much in terms of his like. I understand why he left New Japan in the first place, that it was getting stagnant, but they could have at least preserved that version of Kushida, because as you said, he was in his physical prime, he still had lots and lots to offer, but they seemingly were never truly interested in him as a top player, even on the NXT brand. It's the best move for all parties. Jacket time were, quite frankly, an absolute disgrace.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Steve Austin now. Final story of this video before we hit the Twitter questions. He's appeared on the Brewbound podcast. Beer. He's a big beer man, as you all know. Talking about his wrestling stuff as well. Dusting off the boots to face Kevin Owens at WrestleMania 38. First match in 19 years. What a riot of a time that was. Stating that he's already feeling at 100% physically. That's good to hear. He said he did have a little cold after returning home, but he's feeling good, which is great to hear given his injury history and his previous reticence at the idea of coming out of retirement for a match. Now, as far as WrestleMania 39 goes, Austin said that, well, he's pretty much sure that he's done wrestling. He would answer the call if Vince wanted him to appear at the event next year in Hollywood. He said the following: I can't imagine I won't be there in some capacity. I'm not booking myself on the show because I didn't book myself on WrestleMania 38. That's a Vince thing, and I have a great relationship with him. But if I get the call, I'll be there. I don't know if we'll see another Steve Austin match. It sounds like he's quite happy with the line he has drawn under his career now following the Kevin Owens match. Good to hear he might be in the house, though. I
mean, who wouldn't want to relive WrestleMania 38 Night 1? That main event spectacle, the whole segment was like an angle come match. It was absolutely thrilling. It was absolutely great. Tremendous entertainment value, heightened by the fact that they really hit each other quite shockingly hard at various points. I'd be absolutely bang up for that again. It seems like he could be very much persuaded, and I don't think there's any risk whatsoever of a diminishing return. It's goddamn Stone Cold Steve Austin. He was forever over back in the day. He's going to be forever over as long as he's not wrestled. Even if he wrestled every month, this is Steve Austin we're talking about. I don't think it would get a diminished return factor even then. If it's an annual WrestleMania thing, I welcome it, because they can't build new stars. They might as well exhume the stars from the past, and there were a few bigger stars than Steve Austin that he can still kind of really go. So absolutely, I'm on board for this purely speculative story.
Let's do it. Anyway, let's head over to our Twitter questions for the day. I actually put the thread out a little bit at a different time this time. It dawns on me that maybe...
The Yanks.
Yeah, it dawns on me that maybe tweeting at 6 o'clock in the morning UK time isn't the best.
It's only like Hangman Hollywood P.S. Page parody who's up at that time.
Yeah, and a couple of regulars who have figured out the kind of the format to get on, but I'm doing it a bit different, so look out for it evening UK time tonight as well. But John Harrison comes through, he of many musical talents, of course. John Harrison,
course, yes.
asks, good evening / good morning, boys. Just got up on Rampage. Is Hangman turning heel? In my mind, at least, there were some points during the match where he seemed to be working heel. What do you reckon? Have a great day. I think that more than anything else, rather than leaning into some kind of heel turn or teasing towards that, I just think Hangman Page, the character, hates Adam Cole.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. It's very interesting because the obvious direction is Hangman Page versus CM Punk. Now, on the surface, this appears to be a bizarre move. You do not want to pit two fan favourites against one another. They're obviously going to pick a side, and once you sort of break the dam of someone sort of getting asked to get booed, it's really hard to sort of stem that flow. However, the two people involved, Punk and Adam Page, I would genuinely put up there with two of the most intelligent storytellers in the entire industry right now, perhaps even historically. I don't know what story they're going to tell, and I still have almost complete faith that they are going to play it somewhat perfectly. I don't think Hangman Page is going to turn heel. If anything, I think they're going to really try. Whether this succeeds or not is another question, but I think they're really going to try and have him be the ultimate top babyface, top star of AEW at the expense of CM Punk at Double or Nothing. CM Punk's incredibly over. It's going to be nothing if not fascinating, but I think the intention is to keep him babyface for now.
And as a slight look ahead to tonight's episode of AEW Dynamite, we've got a question here from Jamie Reeve asking if Tony Khan's big announcement is a New Japan co-promoted show, what is the card if you're booking? We had a lot of questions about this, so I've just kind of picked one of them here. But shout outs to everyone who asked about this. There was a lot of people asking for our matches. I think we go one match each. I think that's a good idea.
I can have two.
You can have as many as you want, really, mate. Cheers, to be honest. Jamie here says, I know it's an obvious one, but I'm booking Danielson versus Zack Sabre Jr., which would be a great technical time. Michael, what have you got?
I've got two. That's obviously one of them. There are so many infinite possibilities here that they should do several shows of this nature, in fact. But the two that really jump out to me, interestingly, of late, MJF, and I think he knows what he's doing, is taken to burying New Japan Pro Wrestling in the media. He's described it as quote-unquote the
Yeah.
So there's that. He says that the Great O'Khan is the only one that he likes, which is tremendous because it sort of dovetails into his WWE shtick. Because Great O'Khan, despite being a great fundamental wrestler, plays like sort of a theatrical persona. So given that he's sort of going to be the antagonist towards New Japan Pro Wrestling, I would put him against the heart of New Japan Pro Wrestling, Hiroshi Tanahashi.
Oh,
it's the best babyface versus heel match they have. It would appear that MJF is working towards it. Just the dynamic of the biggest dickhead versus the biggest hero. Both wrestlers like luxuriate and do incredibly well in the spaces between moves, telling a really traditional pro wrestling story match. I think it could be tremendous. On the other side of that, a more explosive state-of-the-art modern match, and this is more fraught with political difficulties because I could see it's going to be like 50-50 booking, but a great version of it on the night, because that's what happens with politically sort of complicated cards such as this. So I wouldn't be able to book a winner, therefore I don't think it's going to happen, but it's fantasy pipe dream booking. Just for the sheer explosive factor, Hangman Page versus Shingo Takagi would be absolutely incredible.
Both of those are unreal, and I can't really better them. So I've booked a match that I would like, purely from a fan's perspective. My favorite wrestler of all time is Tomohiro Ishii. I think he's also one of the best defensive wrestlers of all time in terms of his selling and his comebacks and his conveying a sense of struggle. He is particularly great at this advanced stage in his career against bigger, more imposing, stronger wrestlers, monsters. Powerhouse Hobbs. There's your guy. Yes. There's your guy. He would help make Hobbs look like $1 million. It would be a big scalp for Hobbs to take on his ongoing star-making process. It would be a lot of fun. I would like to see Hobbs emote for Ishii kicking out of one of his big moves at one and then powering up like he always does. Big Tom doesn't always empty the tank these days. He's old. He's worked a physically intense style. He's taken a lot of bumps. There are tag matches where you can see him and you're just like, it's kind of fading away. But then I watched the Suzuki match from Windy City Riot, and let me tell you, it might only be once every 3 months, but the big man can still... Big man, he's like 5'7". Big Tom can still
big
go.
Big aura, man.
There you go. Yeah, that's what I'd like to see. Final question comes from Josh, who asks... Other than money, what incentives seemingly are there for FTR to go back to WWE right now? WWE's tag division seems to be lacking, except for a few certain teams, and it looks like FTR likes the position they are in currently. Unload.
It's interesting because the Cody thing has changed everything. It was a very sobering reminder that people can jump from between two promotions. Legacy and money are two different things, and sometimes one follows the other. And this is what's interesting about this particular act and this particular rumor. We know that this is the FTR year. They could finish this year tomorrow and probably still be in contention for Tag Team of the Year, if not right at the top of that pile. They are also working the American Wolves on an indie show imminently. They've worked the Briscoes. They are going through their dream matches, and they've used the word legacy quite often to sum up this phase of their career on social media when promoting their matches of late, which is interesting because once you've established that legacy, they might just be tempted to do a retirement fund. Now, what's also interesting about this is SmackDown is SmackDown. It's not a very good television show. Neither, for that matter, subjectively is Raw. However, the tag team division has nothing if not a bit of profile about it at this point. The booking isn't particularly sophisticated. We get a lot of non-finishes. We get a lot of rematches, but they are on TV every single week. They are getting time. There was like a half an hour triple threat tag match, which is up there in terms of honourable mentions for WWE's match of the entire year. Now, I think the one common denominator about Raw's profile and the tag team division of late is that Randy Orton happens to be in it. Precedent would suggest that once a top star is taken away from the tag team division, Vince McMahon simply does not care about tag team wrestling, and quite frankly, I can't see Randy Orton and Riddle being a tag team by the time that FTR's contract expires. Right now, if they were free agents and they were discussing their options, they might be tempted to think, you know what, like, Randy Orton is a great friend of theirs, they admire him massively, and they might be thinking, I'd want to get a match with RK Bro, but if that match is off the table in a year, which it almost certainly will be, I can't imagine them leaving.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think that it's interesting to talk about these situations case by case because the Cody thing is what it is. We've picked that apart at great length. But then there are other people like there are certain people who the circumstances of their previous time in WWE are completely different to Cody's. And like a guy like Jon Moxley, from the way he speaks, I can never see that man going back. Even though his contract is up soon, doesn't strike me as that kind of guy, particularly as his book is like 50% him ethering Triple H and WWE and all of the, not Triple H, but you know, WWE.
Kevin Dunn mostly.
Kevin Dunn, yeah. All the
Fantastic.
dumb ideas that came his way. And I think, at least right now, maybe FTR are in a similar boat. Uzi Hot was the thing. They did some knuckle-headed rubbish stuff with those guys. But at the end of the day, when you get later in your career and maybe you want to not have the demands of having to work 5-star matches or whatever else you want to dub it, maybe the retirement fund question does come into it. So right now, I'm totally with you. I don't think there's much incentive at all. They liked working with Randy before, didn't they? When they did
they really were interested in doing a faction with him when they
Yeah.
were like sort of informally almost associated on WWE TV.
Yeah.
But they were desperate to leave for like a good long year before they were eventually allowed. Like, I think there'll still be some bitterness there.
Yeah, and they turned down a lot of money to stick around as
Yes.
well. So there you go. But yeah, let us know what you think, guys, in the comment section below. Thank you for joining us today. You can follow us on Twitter at WhatCulture WWE. You can follow Michael at
Sidgwick.
You can follow me at Andy H. Murray. The H stands for Hristo Stoichkov, who's very,
A legend.
Yeah, and comparable to me in terms of footballing ability.
Shut up.
Goodbye.
Bye.